Hey guys, this is me, KN Nick, and today I'm going to show you what progress the Call of Duty community has made towards solving the current Black Ops Cold War Easter egg. Before I get into the video, go ahead and click that red subscribe button, and while you're at it, hit the bell next to it and click all, because YouTube likes to not give you notifications if you don't do that. I've also noticed that 85.3% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, so if you could do that, it would be a huge help. It's free, and you don't have anything to lose by doing it. A few days ago, the Call of Duty community found a secret website owned by Activision called Pawn Takes Pawn. After a few YouTubers were sent packages containing projectors which led them to secret codes in Black Ops 1, Black Ops 4, and Warzone that finally led them to the website. And on that website there was a blank TV and a VHS player. Now that VHS player kept flashing 12 PM 8-14. Shortly after the site was found, a post-it note was placed on the TV that said /TangledWeb. So we added that to the end of the site and got this. Wars are won not just on the battlefield, but behind closed doors. Tactics, maneuvers, strategies. All pieces of a complex puzzle that means the difference between life and death, conquering or being conquered. Codes, signals, ciphers. Secret communications used by enemies and allies for thousands of years. The plot unfolding is now decades in the making. It will not be unraveled overnight. While some battles can be won swiftly, others will take days to unfold. You have found your first piece of many. Relish the journey. It's all part of the game. The spoils of victory come not to those in haste, but to those who know. Every battle is won before it is ever fought. Know your history.
The French army has seized Algeria in its revolt against de Gaulle. More on that later. In Laos, the government's army suffered its worst defeat of the Civil War, evacuating its last stronghold in north-central Laos. Now the communists may want to begin the ceasefire talks.
And I believe that in the 1960s, the United States can once again capture the imagination of the world.
Chicago, the Windy City, is both windy and snowy in the wake of a storm which leaves more than half a foot. Temperatures drop to 0 during the storm. San Francisco gets the heaviest snow in 30 years. Children, many of whom have never seen snow before, are more spellbound than snowbound, but they soon learn what to do with the stuff.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
And will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan arrives in Key West, Florida for a conference with the President on the explosive crisis in Laos. They jointly declare determination to prevent the Southeast Asian kingdom from being taken over by communist-supported rebels. Also discussed is Britain's ceasefire proposal to Moscow.
Gromyko, is the Soviet Union willing to agree to a ceasefire in Laos?
We touched in conversation this subject. I have nothing to say publicly at this moment.
The look for 61 will recall the Jazz Age, and where Paris leads, the rest of the fashion world is likely to follow.
Here was a new symbol of communist ruthlessness. Overnight, East Berlin became a concentration camp, sealing in the inhabitants of that sector. Barbed wire and cement were the answers to the refugee problem.
Khrushchev repeats his threat to sign a separate peace treaty with East Germany, which he claims, wrongly, will end all Western rights in Berlin.
Served with an order by East German authorities that all U.S. personnel must show identification before entering that section of Berlin, American troops answer with the only language the Reds seem to understand, a show of arms. Castro marks the second anniversary of his revolution with the biggest military parade ever staged in Cuba, featuring tanks and other heavy weapons from Russia and Red Czechoslovakia. Shortly afterwards, Castro demanded the United States Embassy drastically reduce its staff to 11 persons. It was the last straw in his long campaign of provocation and harassment.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal,
before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
The assault has begun on the dictatorship of Fidel Castro. Cuban Army pilots opened the first phase of organized revolt with bombing raids on 3 military bases.
In Havana, Acting Foreign Minister Olivares shows diplomats rockets fired from the Cuban raiders, which he claims have U.S. marking.
These charges are totally false, and I deny them categorically. The United States has committed no aggression against Cuba, and no offensive has been launched from Florida or from any other part of the United States.
Es un honor para mí el estar hoy entre un grupo de los hombres más valientes del mundo.
Castro gloated over his victory and told the world that Cuba was now a socialist nation and would hold no more elections. The next day, the United States officially proclaimed Cuba to be a communist satellite state.
Man had his first great success in space when the Russians pushed a man across the threshold. He was Yuri Gagarin, the astronaut the Russians lionized as the first to orbit the Earth. It was the propaganda coup of the year.
Today, this Redstone Mercury is the center of world attention as Lieutenant Commander Shepard walks to the elevator that will carry him 65 feet aloft to the capsule. It's 6:20 a.m., a moment of history. 3, 2, 1, 0. The rocket performs perfectly as it lifts the funnel-shaped capsule gracefully along.
115 miles up, he went 300 miles downrange, right on target, and was picked up by waiting helicopters. The triumph of Alan B. Shepard, U.S. space pioneer. As the captain prepared to leave the capsule, explosive bolts on the escape hatch let go, and the Mercury is lost. However, the moon gets closer.
Albany, Georgia. A Negro fight against segregation is led by the Reverend Martin Luther King.
And if necessary, we must be willing to fill up the jails all over the state of Georgia.
Солнце. Шар превращается в колоссальный светящийся купол. Яркое свечение еще продолжается. В этом опыте оно длится необычайно долго. Страшной силы напутствует прихода ударной волны.
Just why the Soviet Union would wish to detonate a 50 megaton explosion, something about which we can all speculate.
At Oxford, integration at the University of Mississippi becomes a one-man crusade. When Air Force veteran James Meredith tries to register, the police lines are drawn, U.S. Marshals blocked. When university officials are cited for contempt of federal court, Governor Ross Barnett persecutes the Negro applicant. Meredith goes away, and the federal government ponders its next move. The forces increase tenfold and more. It is not enough to avert a night of rioting, leaving 2 dead and the campus the shambles of a battlefield. "75 students and other rioters are arrested. Among those seized, former Major General Edwin Walker, who is charged with insurrection. And James Meredith becomes a duly registered student at the University of Mississippi."
Sir, there's been a great deal of turmoil and conflict. 2 people have been killed. Do you have any feelings of guilt? Have you given it any second thoughts?
I'm very sorry that anyone had to get hurt or killed. But of course, I think that's an unfair question to me. I don't believe any of you believe that I had anything to do with that.
President Kasavubu was given a Leopold bill on his return from a conference of Congolese leaders in Madagascar, at which it was agreed to convert the republic into a loose confederation. The streets are jammed for a parade in celebration of the decision. But red opposition to the plan is heated, and the pro-Soviet Antoine Gizenga, Lumumba's political heir, still controls key areas and sizable armed forces. The Congo's problems are far from over.
Vienna was a neutral arena for a sparring match between 2 worlds. The men who hold the power to write tomorrow's history met, smiled, and resolved no problems. The dictator and the president, the East and the West. St. James Church in the Hudson River hamlet of Hyde Park is the scene of last rites for the First Lady of the World, Eleanor Roosevelt. President Kennedy heads the list of distinguished world leaders who pay last tribute to the extraordinary and beloved woman who is remembered as a humanitarian and one who loved her fellow man.
There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
From the Cold War, the ground forces of NATO have been alert against the military threat of the communist bloc. Now, Honest John missiles add to NATO's striking power.
President Kennedy begins a tour of 4 space installations at Huntsville, Alabama, where he is greeted by Dr. Wernher von Braun, space pioneer and director of this research and development center. The missiles on display are dwarfed by the mighty Saturn rocket. This booster is the first stage of the rocket that will put the 3-man Apollo capsule into a 2-week orbit of the Earth in 1964. Preliminary to a lunar shoot. Gemini, which was developed here, will allow 2 men to orbit the Earth for 2 weeks and will be used for experiments in outer space rendezvous and docking missions. This winds up the President's first-hand look at our space program and our progress in the race for space.
The first deficit comes from a recession. If we can take the proper action in the proper time, this can be the most important step we can take to prevent another recession. That is the right kind of a tax cut, both for your family budget and the national budget.
Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the peoples of Free China on the island of Taiwan, heads the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the overthrow of the Manchu dynasty. 11 million Chinese, strong with their dream of someday wresting their homeland from the communists, are marking the day that saw the end of 4,000 years of monarchy in China.
Khrushchev declared, through the formation of the world system of socialism, the situation in the world has altered radically. At present, it is not known who encircles whom. On December 2nd, 1961, Castro reveals, I am a Marxist-Leninist and will be one until the day I die. Socialism is a world reality today. There is no halfway between socialism and imperialism.
This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
Communism's adventure in Cuba is a sophisticated one. Political, psychological, subversive, with paramilitary features. Can a democratic society, wherein the right to know and the value of knowing are basic, can a democratic society wage successful political, psychological, subversive warfare against communism?
Leather is falling into step in the fall fashion parade. Finished in an explosion of rainbow colors, leather has been styled into smocks and sheath-top skirts like this eye-stopping pair. Just the thing for a day's outing at Sterling Forest Gardens in New York.
In Trafalgar Square, 2,000 Londoners demonstrate against the United States blockade.
Fidel Castro whips up a furor in Cuba, charging the United States with arming and training mercenary forces for an imminent invasion. He calls out some 200,000 militiamen for training and guard duty at key points throughout Havana. Khrushchev happily receives a gift of the Cuban flag as he lines up with a solid endorsement for the home-brewed anti-Americanism of Fidel Castro, the Soviet sole Western Hemisphere ally.
As he arrives back in Washington, the president hears more bad news. China has just invaded India. Is this part of a two-pronged communist assault? Now the president must weigh all the factors one final time, then make his decision, knowing that whatever he does, he risks nuclear war.
Meanwhile, the United States continues to reinforce its Cuban base at Guantanamo Bay, the naval depot that Castro wants the U.S. to give up. These Marines have been assigned the job of protecting the base against any Cuban threats that might arise during the present crisis.
Mr. President, I am submitting today a resolution to the Security Council designed to find a way out of this calamitous situation. This resolution calls, as an interim measure under Article 40 of the Charter, for the immediate dismantling and withdrawal from Cuba of all missile and other offensive weapons.
The inauguration of Abraham Lincoln as the 16th President of the United States is reenacted in the nation's capital 100 years after the event. There's a crowd larger than the original president this day, double the 10,000 of 1861. And the bright, balmy day is in marked contrast to the gloomy overcast of a century ago. Scenes familiar from history books and movies come to life at the Capitol as Mr. Lincoln arrives. He is portrayed.
The following is the letter which has just been dispatched from the President to Chairman Khrushchev. I think that you and I with our heavy responsibilities for the maintenance of peace, we're aware that developments were approaching a point where events could have become unmanageable. So I welcome this message and consider it an important contribution to peace.
It urgently recommends that the United States and the Soviet Union confer promptly on measures to remove the existing threat to the security of the Western Hemisphere and the peace of the world, and to report thereon to the Security Council.
Earlier today, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara announced that yesterday's photographic surveillance of Cuba indicated that the bases were being dismantled.
But with increased United States aid and instruction, Vietnam soldiers learned to fight back against the communist Viet Cong. Helicopters become a crucial weapon against guerrillas who strike, then disappear will-o'-the-wisp in marshes. Southeast Asia and Berlin are not the only hazard areas in the orchestrated struggle of the Cold War. There is Cuba, from which Bay of Pigs invaders hobble back when their ransom is paid.
The President visits the big missile center at Vandenberg Air Force Base. He becomes the nation's first president to see an intercontinental ballistic missile fired when an Atlas D blasts off its pad to roar down the Pacific Missile Range in a perfect launch.
After the tape, we were given another post-it note, and it still said /tangled web, but another link was added, /EMC2. So when we add that to the end of the site, we get this. Some of the code that played in the VHS tape was relevant to Warzone. If you go to the farm and put the code on a keypad, it opens a secret door. Footage credit to Prestige is key. After that, the community went looking for more clues, and it just so happened that more were out there. Charlie Intel on Twitter started posting ciphers, and 2 more hours, the community was able to solve that as well. As you guys saw for the EMC2 page that appeared yesterday, we got another VHS tape today. I'm going to play it for you.
It seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate. But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.
I am announcing today my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. I do not run for the presidency merely to oppose any man, but to propose new policies.
So it just seems to me what is required in the United States is not what Vice President Humphrey has said, which is the politics of joy and the politics of happiness, but the politics of reality, of what the problems are in the country. I mean, it's all fine that we have all of these. Thank you. You come with me.
January 1968, the Tet Offensive. Suddenly, the enemy finds new strength to strike. denying all American tales of progress.
Vietnam is racked by battle. Saigon is scorched.
United States bombers continued their raids against the North. Our military called the attacks necessary, but Hanoi said that no peace talks could begin until the bombing stopped.
In Morocco's capital city of Rabat, crowds estimated at over 1 million jammed the route of the funeral procession of King Mohammed V. His son and heir, King Hassan, and Tunisian President Bourguiba helped carry the bier.
When finally Vice Premier Key had to go on the air to announce a general curfew throughout the city and the imposition of martial law, he had to do it on the American Armed Forces radio station because his own Saigon radio station had been blown to pieces.
Tonight I have ordered our aircraft and our naval vessels to make no attacks on North Vietnam, except in the area north of the demilitarized zone where the continuing enemy buildup directly threatens Allied forward position.
The North Vietnamese would talk. Gabriel Harriman. With Marshal...
But now, in March, his generals report they need 200,000 more men in Vietnam. These troops he sends to war are fellow citizens. Their warm and precious lives pledged to a cause that many of their countrymen wish to yield. Courage to persist is of the essence of a leader. Courage to stop
sometimes takes greater will.
For the 8th day in a row, fighting continues here in the Cholan district.
Now, since the communist offensive, almost every city and town in South Vietnam is cut off from the others.
President Thieu of South Vietnam said today that anyone who advocates a coalition government for his nation is a traitor. That it will give North Vietnam a total of $45 million in aid and long-term credits.
The minority chants its protest.
I say that when respect for the United States has fallen all over the world, but when it has fallen so low that a fourth-rate military power will hijack an American naval vessel in international waters, then it's time for new leadership for the American people at home, and we should provide it.
10, 9, we have ignition sequence start. The engines are armed. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have liftoff. Liftoff at 7:51 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have cleared the top.
Tower clear, 13 seconds.
Apollo 8, Houston. Apollo 8, Houston. Apollo 8, Houston. Apollo 8, Houston.
Apollo 8, over.
Hello, Apollo 8. Loud and clear.
Roger. Please be informed there is a Santa Claus.
That's affirmative. You're the best ones to know.
As Borman, Lovell, and Anders stepped onto the carrier deck, a huge and patriotic celebration broke loose in Mission Control. A celebration echoed by the hundreds of thousands of men and women who were Apollo 8.
Step on the moon. What do you think of it?
I can't believe in how short, just 8 years, how long we just made us. We beat the Russians and everything. I can't believe it, that it just happened. And we can see it in our lifetime. And how much we'll probably see, you know, without my whole lifetime, more.
Nowhere is the grotesque nature of this year's politics more vivid than in Washington. For the first time since the Civil War, soldiers must defend the Capitol. Machine guns turned upon Americans whose laws no longer bind.
Люди прочтут в газетах, услышат по радио, космический корабль пилотирует разгоняемый советского союза.
The feeling that I had when I won the Olympics was a feeling so proud and just wanting to belong to the country. And it's the most wonderful feeling anyone could ever have.
The tragic news from Czechoslovakia shocks the conscience of the world. The Soviet Union and its allies have invaded a defenseless country to stamp out a resurgence of ordinary human freedom. It is a sad commentary on the communist mind that a sign of liberty in Czechoslovakia is deemed a fundamental threat to the security of the Soviet system. The excuse...
Nejsilnější jsou u předsednictva vlády, které bylo obsazeno nejprve. Násilím byl odsud vyvlečen premiér Černý. Těla rozmístěna v parcích míří i na Pražský hrad. Tam v těchto chvílích dlí prezident republiky Ludvík Svoboda, který zhruba před 25 lety bojoval v čele našich jednotek spolu. I když už po 2. hodině noční, například ředitele spojů Hoffmana, byly vypnuty vysílače. Později se však statečným spojařům podařilo spojení znovu navázat a rozhlas mohl vysílat dál zprávy o napadení Československa.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Nixon chooses Chicago to open his assault on Humphrey in September. There, where only 1 week earlier streets and parks were battleground, the Republican draws 400,000 people. A triumphal first week carries him from Chicago to San Francisco and back across the land. Buoyant, wherever he campaigns, he underscores his message.
The nerve center for is Lavang. It's been transformed by radio antennas, bunkers, and barbed wire into the joint U.S.-Vietnamese command post. On the airstrip at Lavang, tons of artillery and ammunition are loaded and moved out to forward fire bases. The objective, to hit the enemy anywhere between Da Nang and the DMZ and west into Laos again if necessary.
The Marines and airborne vanished into the communist lines. Fired at each target prior to the attack, allowing the populace a chance to escape.
American youth today has its fringes, but that's part of the greatness of our country. I have great faith in American youth. The youth of today can change the world, and if they understand that, I think that we're going to go forward to a great age. Not just for Americans, but for peace and progress for all the people in the world.
This game depends, however, on his unwritten alliance with Reagan. Announcing open candidacy, Reagan now speeds from caucus to caucus. If Reagan can persuade his Southern friends to break their prior pledges to Nixon, the convention will come apart.
NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, presents Aeronautics and Space Report.
At Christmas time, the crew of the USS Pueblo returned home after nearly a year of captivity in North Korea. Hooker and his crew were met by relatives in San Diego. After a tearful reunion, the men unfolded a tale of torture at the hands of the communists bent on extracting concessions. Weeks of probing lay ahead, but for the Pueblo crew, it was a time for rejoicing and sorrow. Grief for the one shipmate.
Astronauts Neil A. Armstrong, Edwin E. Aldrin, and Michael Collins, the three men who will make the next and most historic round trip to the moon.
The men rose early, ate breakfast, and dressed in their spacesuits. They must work in a weightless environment, keeping their spacecraft and themselves in good condition. Data must be collected and reported. Experiments must be performed, including photography both inside and outside the spacecraft. Because of the film speed, these actions appear faster than they actually were.
In Vietnam, Viet Cong rockets hit Saigon during the night for the first time in 2.5 weeks, killing 2 civilians and wounding 25.
The new communist campaign in Vietnam continues. Just after midnight their time, a band of Viet Cong raiders blew up a power installation and attacked 2 police stations in Saigon. Other small bands still roam the city.
Hamburger Hill was the biggest engagement so far in Operation Apache Snow, started 3 weeks ago. The objective of the operation was not the hill, but control of the A Shau, the main infiltration route threatening northern coastal cities. After the 101st Airborne Division troopers wrested Hamburger Hill from the enemy, there was a pause in the fighting. The big guns were cleaned.
The 10-day offensive against the dug-in enemy cost 55 American lives and 300 wounded. Enemy losses are put at 400.
President Nixon's interest is in getting the U.S. out of the war in some acceptable way, whereas President Thu's interest is in seeing his own government survive the end of the war.
In North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh died. He had led his communist forces through 3 decades of warfare. After defeating the French, he fought the U.S. and her allies for 9 years.
I believe we must take risks for peace, but calculated risks, not foolish risks. We shall not trade our defenses for a disarming smile or charming words. We are prepared for new initiatives in the control of arms in the context of other specific moves to reduce tensions around the world. I believe that America is not going to become a garrison state or a welfare state or a police state simply because the American people will defend our values from those forces, external or internal, that would challenge or erode.
The moment you mention nuclear weapons today, a lot of people get jittery and they seem to don't even want to discuss it. Nuclear weapons are a deterrent to war. We ought to remain the strongest nuclear power in the world. And we won't use any weapons unless we have to. But we will use any weapons if necessary to protect America and her people.
More than 350,000 people, mostly young people, showed up to hear the greatest rock groups in the country. The promoters billed it as 3 days of peace and music, and for most people, it was just that. Little thanks to the promoters. There were many problems, like not enough sanitation facilities, food, or water.
Good morning. It'll be 2 or 3 days before all the people leave the peace and quiet of the Catskill Mountains. It may be longer before this area returns to normal. Despite the problems, and there were many problems, though they were not...
Tablets or liquid.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Underneath it says, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace." I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene. That's all right, I don't mind a bit. How is the quality of the TV? Oh, it's beautiful, Mike, it really is. Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent? Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Astronauts Collins, Aldrin, and Armstrong came out of their sealed quarantine tank last night and today had their first day at home in peace. But it will not last long. The schedule in front of them is in some ways more arduous than their trip to the moon.
And after that, more ciphers were added, and even another bunker was found. Sadly, I don't have footage of that because, well, I got banned from Warzone. That's another story for a different time. But the EMC2 page was updated again, and the next video is going to come out tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. I'll upload another video on that after I come home from work. But what could all this mean? Is it leading to a trailer for Black Ops Cold War? Is it leading to a Black Ops Easter egg in Warzone? Will it reveal zombies content? Post your thoughts and opinions in the comments. And that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know if you liked the video by clicking the like button, and subscribe with post notifications on. Comment down below once you've done those things, and I'll respond to every comment I see. Thanks guys. I'll catch you later. Peace!